Hi, I'm Greg Corombos. Welcome to Legal Leaders Exchange. This podcast series was created to deliver insights on optimizing legal operations for corporate legal and insurance claims professionals. This episode, The Importance of the Human Factor in Legal AI-Enabled Solutions, explains why leading providers of AI solutions in the legal industry should have not only relevant AI technology, but also extensive experience in the field, proven market leadership, and robust data to efficiently solve challenges and improve workflows for legal operations teams. We are pleased to have Abhishek Mittal, Vice President of Data Analytics and Operational, and Vince Venturella, Associate Director of Technology Product Management, both at Wolters Kluwer's ELM Solutions. Abhishek and Vince, welcome. I'll pass the conversation over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Vincent Venturella. I'm a product director here at WK ELM Solutions over our core applications. I've also had the good fortune to work over the past several years on many of our AI integrations into the work streams to improve the efficacy, usability of our product and increase productivity for our users. And so today, I'm really excited because we're going to talk about not really the technology side, but more about the people side of AI, because it turns out that's actually just as important. So we're going to talk about leadership and expertise in your AI provider and how important having the right people and the right processes to support those people are in place to supplement and to really supercharge what the technology itself does. And fortunately enough, I have the expert to joining me for this. So Abhishek, I will let you introduce yourself. How you doing, sir?
Thank you, Vince. I'm doing well. Hope the same for you. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. And Abhishek Mittal, I lead the Data Analytics and Operational Excellence Group at Wolters Kluwer's Governance, Risk, and Compliance Division. As Vince said, my team is responsible for bringing AI solutions to life. So not just the data science part of it, but how do I bring in different skill sets of domain experts and process design experts. Love to talk about that today. How do we bring solutions to life?
Yeah, exactly. I think this is sort of my experience out there. Maybe this rings true for you as well, Abhishek. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But I think a lot of people who aren't especially close to AI really feel like it's some kind of magic silver bullet, right? It's just this thing that, oh, well, did you get some AI? As though it's like salt. You just kind of sprinkle it on everything and it just seasons it right up or something, right? But there's a lot more to it than that. Just the technology part of it. That is to say, the models and the features and things like that, those are very powerful once they're in use, supporting people. But the human element of it is really the key, not only for the eventual users, and we'll talk about that in a little while, but perhaps even more importantly, in the design phase. These aren't technologies that just happen, right? It's not as though you can just take AI and just go, oh, hello, AI, I would like you to be good at doing legal invoicing. And then it just says, sure, no problem. Got it, right? There's a process there, and it takes experts from a wide set of domains to get there. So yeah, maybe walk us through that. Because I know you led and are the leader for a lot of these, and I know that your group has some great processes and people involved.
Absolutely. And, we have worked together to create a couple of solutions for ELM. And data scientists are important. Believe me, I have a team of them. But we never start with just building the model and the data. The first thing is what we have brought in is people that we call translators, for lack of a better word, or process design experts. These are the people who really first understand the current process. And if it's a totally new product, try to visualize what the new process should be by talking to the customers, understanding their pain points, working with the domain experts, understanding what content or expertise we have that we want to bring out in the new solution. So I think that number one step, is super important before you even start building the model. Understanding where the pain points are and how are we going to address them. So that's the skill set that these process design experts bring in. Then the second step, of course, the domain experts. Domain experts have always been there in the prior to AI in the software engineering space. They would be providing requirements, or they will be spending time doing user testing. But in the space of AI, domain experts' role is even bigger, because when you have to start with the problem, you have to start with the domain experts labeling the data so that the data scientists can build a proper model. So that's a huge value add. And then once the model is developed, in the usage phase, domain experts have also, again, to use that data to give feedback loop, which is equally important for the model to remain powerful. So the role of a process design expert and a domain expert is super important, and they're there throughout the journey. Data scientists actually, not to minimize, but they do the work which is pretty standard part for them, right? They get the labeled data sets, they are able to apply. There's so many advanced technologies now that the models are pretty much building themselves these days. And then the focus for them is to really understand what the inputs that they're getting and really make sure that they're choosing the right model, the right features. But the heavy lifting is done by the process design experts and the domain experts in visualizing the solution. I think that's the important step.
The journey that you mentioned there, right, of traditionally software design has had these domain experts being part and parcel of it, right? Because, and this is true in my life, my background was in doing technology ops for a legal department, right? Before I ever came here to design a solution, I worked with lawyers every day. I heard their pain points and what they were going through. I know throughout our organization, this is a big part of it for a lot of the solutions that Wolters Kluwer has developed over the years, long before AI ever became part of the discussion, right? Because you have to have people who actually understand the nuanced journey. And when you get into the legal world and these sorts of relationships that are there between the law firm partners, between the legal departments or claims departments or anything like that, right? And then maybe you've got policyholders in there and insurance companies or whatever. There's a lot of complicated back and forth. And if you don't really understand the nuance of what's happening, then you end up designing a solution that is for no one, right? And that's sort of your ultimate nightmare. That's why you can't just show up with AI and say, here, well, let's just throw it at the wall and see what sticks, right? It takes both the people who know what the problems, what the challenges are on a daily basis, but also to say, is this solution valuable? Is this actually giving me data, decision support, whatever, that I can use? Will this actually enhance what I'm already doing, or did I just give myself another step? So I think that one's fairly obvious. But the one I want you to dig in on a little more, because I think this is the part, Abhishek, people don't understand as much if they're not in this world every day like we are. And that's the very first group you mentioned, right? These sorts of these people who are like the process designers or whatnot. These people who go on a journey with the users to actually understand, put things in front of them. Is this usable or not? Because one of the tricks to AI that I've found in my time is that people don't necessarily trust computers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
So the information has to be presented in such a way that it's believable, that they understand where it's from, that it's transparent. Otherwise, they're just going to ignore it, right? So I wanted you to dig in a little more on that. I know you've got some good examples of times where those process folks have come in a big way.
Yeah, it's super important to go in the journey of the customer and do not even start with a preconceived solution. These people have a design thinking background, UI, UX experience. Internally, we call them as strategic design experts. But the skill they have is empathy, trying to walk in the shoes of the user. So let's take an example. For our predictive insight solutions for ELM, the one that we built with ELM in the market, for that one, my team, some of these experts actually worked with you, and they went with some of our customers, users, and they actually observed how are they doing their day-to-day work. This is far before we even had developed any AI solution or a model. This was where we just went and just observed how people are doing their current processes in the current systems and what are the challenges they're facing. Once you have that, and when you ask questions about it and you listen, I think the listening skill is very important. And the questions also have to be, there's a skill to interview. You're not going to say, tell me what's the pain point.
Right.
I think the question has to be more about what bothers you in your work, or how was your day today? What was the most annoying thing in the process in the last month? Things like that. There's a special way to interview these questions and ask these questions so that the interviewer and the interviewee both sort of develop that relationship. So I think that skill is super important. Once you have gathered that data, then able to sort of merge the user input with what the data is saying, and then bringing those insights in a visual manner so that there is buy-in from all the concerned parties that, okay, this is really what my pain is. This is the prioritization of the pain. And then these are the things that I think I can solve through some of the insights that the AI or data can bring to me. I think that's what these people do. To summarize, empathy is key. And that skill is what these process design experts bring in.
Yeah, it's funny because we started on that project and doing those interviews in that process almost 2 years before we launched an eventual product, right? And a big part of what we did, you're exactly right. We would sit down, we would interview people, and your people are much better than that than me. I'll openly admit I was mostly along for the ride. But, we would ask these questions and just try to draw out, say, take me through your day. And when you could just feel people hit a point where they'd start describing non-value add tasks, right? And actually sitting there in the room with them, you watch their body language change, or you can see their frustration when they start to describe something that is a thorn in their paw, right? And that's when those good interviewers that have that empathy will then dig in. And then, we would come back a second time, a third time with those users or different users based on that feedback. And we'd have mock-ups and screens and things like that and say, okay, here's some information we'd present to you at this point in your task, in your workflow. Do you feel this would be useful, right? And we would actually survey people on the information we collected. Keep in mind, this is still, as we mentioned, this is so long before code has been written. Right? That's not even what we're talking about yet, because if you don't get this part right, no one's going to care what your code says. It's going to fall on deaf ears. And those surveys were incredibly illuminating to how we ended up designing the overall product, because what we found was some of our assumptions were wrong. And as we dug into that, we saw, actually, this piece of data, not very useful. This piece of data, very, very useful. This piece of data, they like it, but they want to understand it more, right? So we need breakouts of information. I think this is one of those things, again, where human expertise and leadership comes into play. Humans naturally have a trust for other humans they work with, okay? So if I stand up out of my, in a normal world where I'm sitting in an office, if I stand up out of the cube or walk out my office door and I ask somebody else a question, I'm generally going to trust their response, right? Hey, what do you know about this thing or that thing? If a computer gives them that same answer, even if it's an aggregation of everybody's thoughts and feelings on that floor, people are naturally more suspect of it, even though it's actually more robust information. So I thought maybe one of the things we could talk about, Abhishek, is how we've built transparency into this, right? How having that expertise and doing this early work also helps us build in transparency into the process. So we don't just show the answer, don't just show the decision support, the data, but we show what's underlied it as well. So I thought maybe you could give a story, something you've ran into with that, because I know we've run into this many times across groups.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with a personal story, right? I love my car and I'm a technologist, but I'm not ready or do not have enough trust to let it be, driving it, even if there might be a capability in at least some cars there is. But I do love and I do use the backup feature in my car, right? Where it auto stops if somebody's coming in. And I think that's very similarly, we have to think of AI in our corporate life as well, that it's a smart assistance and we have to be smart to identify what are the blind spots when we are trying to make a decision, and what are the strengths of this smart assistant, which is AI technology, where it can really help us make the decision. So I think that's the same thing. And then I have to know to turn that feature on, because I need to know how it works, right? Why it works. And the more you use it, the more confident you become then. So I think that's the same thing with AI in our space, in any corporate space, that you have to provide, first of all, if you're starting fresh into AI solutions, you have to think of starting what use case do you want to start with. Initially, people will start with a prioritization use case. Imagine you have 100,000 invoices that you need to take care of, and you can only review, or the capacity is only to 30,000. Which are those 30,000 invoices that you want to read? I think there's a perfect use case for AI to help you prioritize, to make sure that you are capturing the maximum value. So that's a good example. Then the second use case that people typically start with is where, how do you do your quality assurance? It's unlikely that you can do 100% quality audit, because that will be too timely and too costly. People usually do a random sample, but this is again where you can use AI to begin with, use a sampling approach, which is based where AI and humans are disagreeing, because now you have a sample where there's an opportunity for somebody to learn, whether it's the machine or the human. So I think that's another use case. And then when it comes to recommendation engines, right, the piece that you talked about, you have to earn. It's like you have to earn the credit, right? When you join, you work with a new professor, you have to really start working. You have to do well on your quizzes, then the tests, then the papers. So I think it's the same with the AI, right? AI has to explain why it's giving a recommendation of, picking a law firm or adjusting an invoice. Explaining the factors which are driving that decision is important. And that has been something that we've worked really very hard. And it comes by understanding what are people looking for, and then of course trying to balance it with what the machine can provide, and finding the perfect union of those. It takes some effort and time, and that's where the people expertise come in. That's where the data science expertise of the human comes in, as I was saying, to make sure once they get that feedback from the domain experts or the design experts, they are able to understand what features of the model they need to expose, so that customers or the users understand what's driving the score. So I think that's been the journey.
Yeah, exactly. There's so much there, Abhishek, that you just mentioned that I think is worth really drilling in on. So the first thing is, when you mention sort of the human feedback, right? The data scientists, we kind of, I don't want to say we short shrifted our data scientists. We love them during the early part, but this is again where the human expert comes in, because the data scientist also needs to be there acting as an expert, knowing when the model is giving good recommendations or bad, as part of the feedback loop that inevitably happens with the user human expert, right? What we're actually doing and creating, this is the sort of sneaky part of this, right? With the AI, is we're actually creating a new way for the human data scientist and the human end user acting on the decision support through that machine learning loop to actually collaborate and speak to each other. I think a lot of people don't, when you say the machine gets smarter, it does, but that's because of how the human programmed it to work, to understand what sort of, this is a bad response, this is the user telling you deprioritize this in the future, this is the user telling you up prioritize this in the future, so on and so forth, right? It's not as though they're having a direct back and forth email conversation, but almost through the code, through the AI, they are talking back and forth through this process. But you've got to have the humans making good decisions on both sides, right? The
Absolutely.
Human experts who are getting that data and making these decisions are then going to logically do whatever their job demands. So we've mentioned predictive insights a moment. I'm going to drill in on that, because predictive insights, I think, is just a really good example of this process. So we have a solution called LegalVIEW Predictive Insights that gives users real-time information on what law firm, what the budget will be for that law firm, and how long the case is going to last for litigation. So they open a new piece of litigation, boom, within about 60 seconds, they have all this information. It's saying, here's your best law firm partner, here's why, here's how they've performed on similar looking cases, here's how much it's going to cost you. Okay, great. Simple, easy to understand what it's doing there, right? It's classic decision support AI. But the user's then going to interact with that, right? They're going to then start making choices from amongst the recommendations. And when they do that, that's going to feed back to the data scientist, who's then looking at the model and the model's recommendations and needs to be able to understand, okay, so what we saw is within this group, no one's picking the top three, right? They're always starting at 4 or below. Now, is that because of something unique with that group and just the way that they operate, the firms? Are we missing something here, right? Is the model missing something? Or is it just an oddity, right? And so that's where that human expertise again comes in, because it has to be this evolving process. I think we all understand that the AI through machine learning is going to get smarter, but it doesn't do it all on its own. There's a human in there who's also helping guide that model, right? And the features that are composing what it's doing and the decisions it's going to make.
Absolutely. I think that just to add to what you just said, the data scientist, frankly, internally we call the team as decision scientists, because it's all about the decision. It's data science is the technology, but what is the decision which the expert is making? What were the factors that drive those decisions? That's what we want to improve, not the model. The ultimate success is what is the decision and how can we improve the decisions that our experts are making, and understanding that, analyzing the decisions, because there's a lot of human behavior science here, because certain group of people might react differently to what insights are shown when insights and recommendations are shown to them. So I think that's where the human data scientist really is looking at the responses and trying to segment them, understanding where there is high alignment between the machine and the human, and where there is low, and what are the factors driving those discrepancies, and then try to bring them closer. So that's why it's always a learning process. As you said, it's not build it and then walk away. You have to be involved to continuously make sure that the alignment, if it's high, it remains high. If it is low or medium, then how can it get high? But your sort of engagement remains.
Yeah. I think sort of the last area I want to talk about here as we start bringing this toward the end is, I mentioned at the beginning that there's really two conceits here, right? Expertise and leadership. And we've talked a lot about expertise, about the experts, right? Whether it's at the beginning of the process when you're interviewing folks, trying to find the pain points and figure out what the actual solutions need to be providing data on. If you're talking about your domain experts who know this domain very well, then can help shape what the model eventually becomes, or the decision experts, right? The data scientists who are then, designing a world-class model. And I think your team has shown this process works. I mean, your team won, I think, more than 20 awards for the products they created last year, just in 1 year, industry awards. That's incredible, right? So that right there shows that your process is successful and the power of expertise. But I think leadership is the other part here, right? We do have to also understand that a lot of times these solutions that are being developed are new, aren't something that people are going to be familiar with. They're going to ask people to make decisions differently. We talked a lot about change management in a previous episode. I would encourage people to go check that out if they haven't already in this process. But I think just the leadership itself of being willing to lead. And I was wondering if you might have had some thoughts about, how, as you are a leader for that group, and how you've thought about leadership in the AI space and how we frame it up, right? How do we look at the landscape and say, well, just because no one else has made this solution doesn't mean we can't make this solution? Because I think that's been true. We've proven time and time again that in fact we can find a solution where maybe no one else has, and then how that leadership comes into play?
Great question. And I think it starts with the company culture as well. I think right from our top leadership, they have sort of shown that our strategic intent of Wolters Kluwer is to build expert solutions, which is leverage our content, leverage our expertise, and leverage advanced technologies like AI to deliver actionable outcomes for our customers. That's what drives Wolters Kluwer. That's what our senior leaders do. That's what we try to do at our team level. So first of all, that strategic intent coming from our top leadership is important because that's what sort of permeates the organization. Now, talking a little bit about my team, I think there are a lot of capabilities that you need, right? So there's, of course, data science capability. You need data assets. You need a good data platform or machine learning platform. But there's one very strong capability to achieve success, which I call as customer understanding, right? So understanding the customers, like really understanding their, as we talked about, their users, their data, before you start building their solutions. And then we have also invested in certain other capabilities, like co-creation with the customer and experimentation. This is not a straight line project. You have to sort of do the iterative loops. And that's why this ability of understanding the customer, they're doing experiments with them, co-creating with them, I think that capability is something that we are very strong as a company. And that helps us stay close to our customers and also build solutions which have real value. And that motivates our data scientists as well, by the way. A majority of when I have to go and recruit, people talk about technology, people talk about algorithms, but one thing that we are also able to talk about is impact in real use cases. And I think that's what drives everybody, because ultimately everybody wants to see the impact of their work. And that's what drives us. So I think that's key for success.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you wrapped up and you hit exactly the note that I was looking for there, that actually to lead, you have to serve, right? And that's serving the customer. What are their pain points? What are their problems? What do they need help on? How can we improve this? And that takes research, because they're not going to, as you said earlier, they're not going to tell you directly, oh, this is what I don't like. This is my pain point, right? The user doesn't always think like that, right? Because some of it might have become pretty ingrained in their daily habits. And so leadership is saying, you go, you do the investigation, you work it through, and then building that solution and making it transparent to them. And where that leadership then comes in at the end is bringing them along on the journey through the way you've designed the product, right? Or through the offering or the solution or whatever you want to say, that they use it, it feels intuitive, it feels right, it feels natural. And they then trust that computer as much as they're going to trust the person who's sitting in the cube next to them. That's ultimately what it is. And if you've got the right humans, the right experts who've done the right steps that we've described along the way, then you can lead. I think that's what it comes down to. I think that covers everything I wanted to cover. Abhishek, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you, Vince. Had a great time.
Those were Abhishek Mittal, Vice President of Data Analytics and Operational Excellence, and Vince Venturella, Associate Director of Technology Product Management, both from Wolters Kluwer's ELM Solutions. This podcast was hosted by Wolters Kluwer's ELM Solutions, the market-leading provider of enterprise legal spend and matter management, contract lifecycle management, and legal analytics solutions. For more information and additional guidance, please visit www.wolterskluwer.com or call 1-713-572-3282. Please join us for future podcasts on optimizing legal operations and achieving your legal and business goals.